think it's my duty to present to you the reality of the situation in Palestine. Because I believe you have the right to know the truth. It is especially important to do that, given the fact that unfortunately most of the media outlets do not present to you the reality as they should. And in many cases, as I found in my work, most of the Western media is definitely influenced by a certain narrative, usually the Israeli narrative, when describing the situation. So, of course, when I present that to you, you're not going to see that I'm neutral. I'm not neutral, and I don't claim that. I am a Palestinian who's defending Palestinian cause, but who's defending justice in the region for everybody. But I will try to be as objective as I could. But presenting the truth and the reality to you is very important, because as once a great writer and feminist said, Virginia Woolf, she said, nothing has happened till it's been described. And there are big parts of our history that were lost because they were not described. And we've promised ourselves that we will not let this happen to us again. I will try to explain to you the situation, not because you will notice in my talk, I'm not going to talk about the Palestinian rights from the perspective of nationalism, because this is not my goal. As a matter of fact, I think even if I wasn't a Palestinian, if I was born somebody else, Canadian maybe, or anybody else, and knew the situation, I would be doing exactly what I'm going to do today. Because this is an issue of justice that concerns not only Palestinians, or Arabs, or Christians, or Muslims. It concerns all humanity. That's how I see it. The second thing I will do is to try to explain to you this rise of a very powerful movement of nonviolence in Palestine, and why the rise of this movement is so important, why it is promising, but why also it is so important that it is supported by strong international solidarity movement to guarantee its success. And then maybe I will try to explain what you can do to help in this situation. But let us first start with the situation. It is important to mention that the whole idea of two-state solution is not new. It's something that goes back to 1947. Originally, the Palestinians, before most of them got dispossessed in 1948 by the Israeli troops, Palestinians opted and wanted to have one democratic state in Palestine with everybody living together side by side with equal rights and equal duties. The world community pushed for another kind of solution, which is two states. And in 1947, the United Nations decided on the so-called partition plan, which would allocate 55% of the land of historic Palestine to Israelis, to Israel, and 45% to Palestinians. At that time, Palestinians represented 70% of the population of Palestine and owned more than 90% of the land. Yet Israel was established not on 55%, but rather on 78%. What remained was only the West Bank and Gaza Strip, which is only 22% of the historic Palestine. And this area was occupied by Israel in 1967. In 1988, the PLO, being the representative of the Palestinians, decided to accept a very painful compromise. And that compromise was that they would agree with a two-state solution where Palestinian state would be established in the West Bank and Gaza Strip only. That means Palestinians accepted to have a state in less than half of what they should have had according to the same United Nations resolution which gave Israel its legitimacy. And many Palestinians thought this would lead to peace. That was the basis of Oslo Agreement. And to the great surprise of the Palestinian negotiators, when they went to Camp David in 1999, this was the map offered to them by the Israelis, where the state would be without Jerusalem, without borders, without many areas in the West Bank that include many of the settlements, and most important, without most of the water resources in the West Bank. And as if this was not enough, Prime Minister Sharon at the time of Israel, and then later Netanyahu, came up with this plan, which is to take away even more parts of the West Bank, specifically the whole area of the Jordan Valley, and to transform the concept of statehood into nothing but clusters of ghettos or pantustans. So it is important to recognize how the whole idea of statehood over years was reduced gradually from 45% to 22%, which Palestinians accepted, down to 18%, and then later to less than 11% in fragmented territories. Did this happen by accident? No. It happened according to a plan, and that plan was developed back in 1967 when the Israeli foreign minister at the time, Yigal Allon, decided to develop this plan, which was adopted by the Israeli establishment, to deal with a problem that the Israelis faced when they occupied us in 1967. That problem was we did not leave as they expected. The people decided to learn from the experience of 48, and although their life was at risk, their decision was we will stay even if we will be killed. And that created the so-called demographic problem for Israel, because they didn't expect to occupy the West Bank and Gaza and find all these people there. So the Yigal Allon plan was about how to contain the so-called demographic factor. And the Allon plan was about building settlements around Jerusalem, in the Jordan Valley, and then up in the north and in the south, to enclave Palestinian cities and villages into these clusters of ghettos or pantustans. And that's exactly what happened. This is how the West Bank looked like back in 1967. All the yellow spots you see on the map are Palestinian communities, villages, towns, or refugee camps. There wasn't a single Jewish colony or settlement. First, they built settlements, all these red spots. Then they created a series of checkpoints. I put on the map only half of the military checkpoints, which mount to 630 today. Because if I put all the checkpoints on the map, you will see a completely black map. Then came the wall. The wall was nothing but another factor in a matrix, which was designed to appropriate as much land as possible. The wall, contrary to what many people think, is not a wall on the borders between West Bank and Israel. It is not separating Israelis from Palestinians. It is a wall that in 85% of the time is built inside the occupied territories, and in most of the time it is separating Palestinians from Palestinians. They claim that the wall was built for security reasons. This is not true. This map shows you the so-called Oslo map. On this map you can see in these dark brown spots the areas that were given to the Palestinian Authority to control. Now, of course, Israel has taken back everything they gave, because there isn't any security, complete control of the Palestinian Authority anywhere. But during the implementation of Oslo, which started in 1994, Contrary to what Oslo Agreement said, Israel did not redeploy from 90% of the West Bank as it should have, but redeployed only from these dark spots and allowed the Palestinian Authority to have some kind of functional authority in the yellow areas, like collecting garbage or controlling the sewage systems, but they existed. But the rest of the white area, this whole white area, which is called Area C, more than 60% of the West Bank, was maintained under Israeli complete control. That means that if I have a land in Area C, I will not be allowed. That was a deterioration, by the way, from before Oslo, because after Oslo, if I had to plant a tree in any of the pieces of the land in Area C, even if I owned the land, I would need a permit from the Israeli military. Nobody could build a house, put a water pipe, or build a school without Israeli permits. The only map that looks like this in modern history was this map, the map of the Bantustans in the South African apartheid system.